Good morning, world. It is Tuesday, February 13th at 9:53 a.m. Thai time. And yeah, today is not going to be an exciting day, to be completely honest. It's another like hardcore work day. I do have that date tonight. I think I'm gonna go. I'm really not sure that I'm at all excited about this, honestly, but it'll be an experience either way. I don't know. I don't really know what it's like to date a local somewhere I travel, so not that I'm planning to go on multiple dates here. I really don't know. But that's happening at 7 p.m. tonight. That's kind of on my mind, though. I honestly don't care that much, so I'm not really thinking too much about it. Other exciting news today, and I'm not going to show this on camera because it's kind of gross, but I got my first mosquito bites, like overnight or something, I don't know. But that's pretty terrifying, actually. I've managed to go like a whole week and change without getting any mosquito bites, and today I woke up with 2 of them on like my leg and on my foot. And the reason why this is a big deal in Southeast Asia is because there are a lot of mosquito-borne diseases here. One of the things I don't think I've talked about so far is the funness of getting vaccinated for travel out here. So when you travel to Southeast Asia, there's like 3 or 4 different things, maybe even 5 or 6 different things that you could get vaccinated for. And I'm getting the impression that like various people just have different risk tolerances. But some of these things are really scary. Like, well, sorry, I don't know what that truck is doing, but it's very loud. Some of these things are really scary, right? Like, you have Japanese encephalitis, which like, in some cases is totally harmless, but in some cases, basically you die, right? And it's kind of like that down the board. There are also some vaccines that you can get for like comfort, like cholera and rabies, etc. Like if you might get bitten by something, right? But the problem with most of these vaccines is that the vast majority of them are not covered by insurance because these are all considered sort of like at your own risk kinds of things. Like you put yourself in an extraneous risk circumstance. So you're paying out of pocket for a lot of these vaccines, and they're really not cheap. I think one of my biggest expenses before I left was actually getting these vaccines, and it was something like the Japanese encephalitis vaccine is 2 shots in a series. Each shot was $200+. So these things are really not cheap, and there are still some things out here that are mosquito-borne that you cannot get vaccinated for. So chief among those would be dengue out here. And I've actually encountered several travelers who either have had dengue themselves or know someone who has. And it sounds really freaking awful. Basically your only defense against dengue is don't get bitten. So the fact that I have been bitten is disappointing and terrifying. And I'm crossing the street and hoping not to die on camera here. Cool, that worked out. So that I'm getting bitten now is like kind of concerning for me. Dengue, I hear there are like 4 or 5 different strains of dengue. And since there's no vaccination, obviously there's like no prior defense. After you get bitten and you get dengue, you can't get the same strain of dengue again. You become somewhat immune, but there are 4 different versions of it. So you're kind of screwed no matter what you do. So I have a large bottle of Picardan-based mosquito repellent in my bag, which I'm guessing I just maybe forgot to reapply yesterday. And I now have some very itchy reminders not to make that same mistake ever again. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully I don't get dengue this time. I really don't know what the incubation period is for that. Alright, so it is 6:57 p.m. I am on my way to this date that I've been mentioning earlier. don't really want to make a big deal out of this, but I guess this is an important part of my, I guess like what's going on internally in my head is an important part of my experience of this. So it's worth maybe jotting down some thoughts here. Overall, I wouldn't say I'm nervous about this. I think I'm more like, I'm not like personally nervous, right? Like I'm more worried about getting stuck at dinner with someone I just really don't want to be stuck at dinner with, right? I think people who have talked to me about dating before have probably heard me say that my general rule is usually hell yes or no when it comes to dating, and that's been true. It's been like 90 to 95% true about like dates I've gone on in the past. Now, mind you, I haven't been on that many dates. You can count the number of dates I've been on probably on 2 hands. I guess depends on how you define it. There's some exceptions here, but like generally speaking, I've been on like on the order of less than 10 first dates in my life. And most of the time, if I don't feel pretty hell yes about it, I'd like would not bother approaching someone, or like probably wouldn't bother with like asking for a date. Now, what I have been finding is that mentality is all well and good when, you know, you end up having a lot of people that you want to spend your time with, right? So like when I was in the Bay Area, for example, it was like, why would I invest time in like these random people that I don't necessarily like, I'm not really interested in, when I have like all these other friends that I'd rather be hanging out with, right? It's been a little different for me, I think, being in like other places where like I don't really know tons of people, right? And like don't necessarily have as much going on, so I have like maybe a little more time and freedom to just explore. So I think that's part of what's happening here. Here I am like kind of realizing that like my hell yes or no strategy for first dates is like, generally it's been, I mean, I so far haven't seen any examples where like I've gone on a date with someone who wasn't a hell yes, and like turns out that like my mind was super changed. But it's also the case that I really just don't have that many data points. So for all I know, it's possible that I have overly optimized too early here. And I think that like part of what I'm trying to do here right now is just kind of like explore a little bit, experience a little more, just keep an open mind about things and about people. I think the experience will overall be good for me. So I mean, like, really, I honestly don't know what to expect on all this, but I think that, especially if it's an uncomfortable experience, I have a lot to learn from it. And so that's why I'm going, despite the fact that I know that I'm not like objectively really excited about this from the outset. Yeah, and I guess the worst case scenario is that like I get food, I meet someone random who hopefully is kind of interesting in at least one way, right? So I don't know. I think that maybe my dating philosophy is evolving a little bit, because I'm realizing that I definitely do need to just learn more about the process and see what happens when I try things. But perhaps that will change as I try things and discover things that I really don't like. So anyway, I guess maybe I'll be back after this date to record some initial thoughts on just how uncomfortable this is, or whatever. Or great, I don't know. Keep an open mind, right? Alright, I am walking home from this date, and yeah, I don't know. It was a very different experience for me. I would say it defied my expectations in a lot of ways. Where do I start? I think, well, so firstly, I think this is probably my first experience with like, you know, meeting someone on like a dating app, and then like having kind of like the real person not be quite as they advertise themselves on the dating app. Like, you know, doctoring the pictures a little bit or whatever, and so it's maybe a little brutal, but it's just the truth, right? Not strongly attracted to this person, but she's a very nice person to talk to. She's very well, she didn't seem to have a whole lot of opinions about a lot of things. Got a lot of I don't knows, but did have some interesting conversation about, you know, like Chiang Mai. Like she grew up here and was trying to understand a little bit more about local culture and local norms, and you know, I think it was a cool experience for me, both because I think it pushed me out of my comfort zone. You know, initially I actually was like surprisingly like on edge about the whole thing, and it took me probably a couple of minutes to just like snap out of that and be like, you know what, whatever, I'm just having a conversation with someone, it really doesn't matter. But I think I also, like, I don't get many opportunities here in Chiang Mai, I think, to like hang out with locals, or at least so far I have not. And so kind of getting to talk to someone about like their background and their experience was like very, very different from the normal kinds of people that I meet here so far. Like mostly I'm in the expat crowds, right? Like I'm meeting people in coffee shops who clearly don't look like locals, or meeting people in co-working spaces who, you know, don't cover the country and are doing kind of like crazy travel adventures, and this was a very different perspective on Chiang Mai, and I'm glad that I did it. I also, I think this is a lesson for me in like, I don't know, judging people before you meet them, right? So there was some amount of like fear for me in this whole, like, part of my hesitation in doing this date in the first place was, well, I was like very confused by this GIF this person sent, or GIF. I'm sorry if I've offended you with the way I pronounce that word, whatever. But what she sent there was like kind of off-putting for me. It's kind of like, whoa, like you just sent me like a GIF of like a very, very tan, long-haired dude going peace. Like, it's a very interesting personality choice, right? But I also was worried, because like I'm very aware that there's a huge income disparity between basically anyone coming from outside of Chiang Mai and anyone in Chiang Mai. Like the amount that they make here on a daily basis is like peanuts. It's actually kind of like I don't entirely understand it, right? Like the cost of living here is very low from my perspective, but like some people are making something like 200, 300 baht a day, right? And so from my perspective, that's like, oh my God, right? Like a meal is 300 baht, that's like $10. Like, oh my God, a meal is 40 baht, right? That's like $1. But anyway, knowing that there's that disparity, right? Like, and I also know that there's a reputation for like certain types of Thai women who are like basically looking for foreigners to kind of like wring foreigners for their cash, because they know that foreigners are probably a little more wealthy. So I was kind of skeptical and like suspicious that this girl wanted to go to this Korean barbecue place. So we went to like an all-you-can-eat Korean barbecue place, and I was thinking that she wanted to go there because it's expensive, and therefore it's like, you know, if she's expecting me to treat, it's kind of a treat for her, right? And I was surprised because, well, not only was she not necessarily like super strange, as like the GIF that she sent me would suggest, but she ended up, you know, we ended up splitting the meal. I offered to pay, but we ended up splitting the meal, and so clearly, like, both of my assumptions about this interaction were totally candidly false. And I think I should take that to heart. You know, like, don't judge people. Don't make assumptions like that. You really just don't know. I'm glad that I kept an open mind. I don't think that, you know, I think it was a good experience for me. I don't think I've gotten any closer necessarily to, you know, finding the love of my life necessarily, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a worthwhile interaction with, another living, feeling human being who has their own struggles and worries and expectations and etc. Right? So it was interesting, kind of getting to experience the inside of someone else's head, especially someone so different from myself, from such a different background. So anyway, I do not know whether or not I will end up going on more dates with locals. I would not say that I am particularly good at online dating, so it's not like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens here. I'm open to the idea, but I have not necessarily been like, I don't know, shook by this experience. So I'm open to it. We'll see what happens.